This morning you woke up, checked your phone, drank coffee, and started your day. Every one of those things happened in the wrong order, and the order is not a preference, it is a sequence. Your body's chemistry dictates hour by hour, organ by organ, exactly what it needs and when. Nobody has ever assembled the full picture for you. Until now. Richard Feynman once said that nature uses only the longest threads to weave her patterns, so each small piece of her fabric reveals the organization of the entire tapestry. Your body is that tapestry, and what follows is the organization nobody showed you. 6:00 Gazros in the morning. You have not consumed fluid for 7 to 8 hours. Your plasma volume has dropped 5 to 8% through overnight insensible loss. Respiration, transepidermal evaporation, concentrated urine production. Your blood viscosity is at its 24-hour maximum. Fibrinogen concentration is elevated. Platelet aggregability is increased. The window between 6 in the morning and noon is when myocardial infarction and stroke incidents peak in every population ever studied, as Mueller and colleagues documented in the New England Journal of Medicine. And your blood is at its thickest and most thrombogenic at the exact hour that window opens. 1 glass of water, 400 to 500 milliliters, before coffee, before food, before checking the phone. The plasma dilutes within 15 to 20 minutes. Viscosity drops. The gastrocolic reflex triggers. Gastric distension from the water stimulates colonic motility, producing the morning bowel movement that skipping the water and reaching for coffee instead has been trying to produce with caffeine. The water dilutes the blood that was trying to clot. This is not a wellness habit. It is a dilution of blood that peaks in thrombogenicity at the exact hour the cardiac risk window opens. The glass of water at 6 in the morning is the single most consequential act of the day, and most people skip it. 5 minutes later. The first 5 minutes of movement after waking are more physiologically dense than the next 30. Synovial fluid in every joint gelled overnight. The thixotropic property operating in every joint capsule across 7 hours of stillness. Morning stiffness is the lubricant gelled overnight, thinned by 6 steps. The first 6 steps apply shear force that thins the fluid. By 60 seconds, the knees and hips are moving freely. The cartilage that received 0 nutrient delivery overnight begins receiving fresh synovial fluid through the compression-release pumping of each step. Capillaries in the leg muscles that were collapsed during sleep, 75 to 80% of the capillary network closed, receiving no flow, open within 2 to 3 minutes of walking, as the working muscles produce local vasodilators. The perfusion surface area triples. The sluggishness that felt like not being a morning person was partial ischemia. Tissue receiving a fraction of its blood supply. 3 minutes of walking opens the vessels. 10 minutes captures the full transition cascade. Synovial thinning, capillary recruitment, venous pump activation, lymphatic flow initiation, and BDNF release, beginning at minute 4 and building across the walk. The hippocampal growth that Erickson and colleagues documented at the University of Pittsburgh, measurable volume increase in the brain structure that consolidates memory, begins with the molecular cascade that each morning walk initiates. Arms swing freely, head over shoulders, ears aligned, chin parallel to the ground, eyes on the horizon. This posture reduces lumbar rotational loading by 60% per step. The cervical spine carries 5 kilograms instead of the 20 to 27 it carries when the head tilts forward into the screen posture most people bring to their morning walk without noticing. 6.15. Within the first hour of waking, sunlight entering the eyes reaches the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. Melanopsin-containing neurons that do not produce vision, but signal to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the brain's master circadian clock. That signal resets every peripheral clock in the body. Liver, pancreas, adrenal, gut, synchronizing them to the solar cycle. The cortisol awakening response that peaks in the first 30 to 45 minutes after waking is calibrated by this light signal. Without morning light, the clocks drift, and the downstream timing of insulin sensitivity, melatonin release, core temperature rhythm, and cortisol cycling loses precision that compounds across the entire day. 10 minutes of outdoor light. Even on an overcast day, outdoor illumination is 10 to 50 times stronger than indoor lighting. The signal requires the eyes, but the skin benefits separately. UVB initiates vitamin D synthesis in the epidermis. Near-infrared wavelengths penetrate to the mitochondrial level, enhancing ATP production through cytochrome CE oxidase activation. The sunlight is the synchronization signal that every clock in the body is waiting for. Walking and sunlight overlap. 10 minutes of outdoor walking in morning light captures the circadian reset, the synovial thinning, the capillary recruitment, the BDNF initiation, and the UVB exposure in a single 10-minute window. The physics is simultaneous. No need to sequence what the body processes in parallel. 7 ox, breakfast, because the pancreas has a clock, and the clock peaks in the morning. Insulin sensitivity follows a circadian rhythm, highest in the morning, declining through the afternoon, lowest in the evening. Pancreatic beta cells produce more insulin per glucose load in the morning. Muscle cells are more responsive. Glucose uptake per unit of insulin is higher. Hepatic glycogen storage capacity peaks in the morning hours. An identical meal consumed at 7 in the morning produces a lower glucose spike, a smaller insulin response, and more efficient glucose disposal than the same meal consumed at 9 in the evening. The food is identical. The calories are identical. The body's capacity to process them is different because the pancreatic clock, the hepatic clock, and the muscle insulin receptor sensitivity all peak in the morning. Protein at breakfast matters specifically. The thermic effect of food is highest for protein, burning 20 to 30% of its caloric content during digestion. The amino acids provide the substrate for the muscle protein synthesis that the overnight fasting period suppressed, and the satiety signal per calorie is strongest for protein. The peptide YY and GLP-1 response from the gut produces more sustained fullness from 100 calories of protein than from 100 calories of carbohydrate or fat. Coffee after the water, not before. The water dilutes overnight viscosity before the caffeine adds cardiac demand through cortisol amplification. Caffeine, before water, lands on a cardiovascular system still running thick blood. Caffeine after water lands on a system that has already begun normalizing. The sequence matters because the interaction lands on biology that is either at its riskiest or has already been partially corrected. 8 Siritalar to noon. The desk hours. Because 4 hours of sitting produces 4 hours of cumulative damage across systems that require periodic mechanical input to function. Every 30 to 45 minutes, 90 seconds of intervention reverses what the sitting accumulated. 3 actions, 30 seconds each. A standing desk does not solve the problem. It replaces the hip flexion of sitting with the static loading of standing. It trades one compression pattern for another and provides no mechanical input to the systems that require dynamic movement. The intervention is the transition. The act of changing position, which loads the joints through a range, pumps the synovial fluid, recruits the postural muscles through a new pattern, and provides the shear force that the thixotropic fluid in every joint needs to maintain its liquid state. Sitting for 30 minutes, then standing for 5, then sitting again, captures more of the mechanical benefit than standing for 4 hours continuously, because the transitions produce the loading events that static positions do not. Thoracic extension. Ears over shoulders. Sternum lifts. 5 deep breaths at full lung volume. The upper back that has been rounding into kyphosis straightens. The rib cage that has been compressing the diaphragm opens. The diaphragm, now able to descend fully, contacts the vagus nerve at the diaphragmatic hiatus. Parasympathetic tone that has been drifting sympathetically for the past 30 minutes is restored. Distance viewing. 60 seconds looking at the most distant visible object. The ciliary muscle that has been locked in sustained contraction since the last break releases. The accommodation spasm resolves as the muscle relaxes fully. The convergence drops. The pupils dilate. The metabolic waste that accumulated during the sustained contraction flushes with restored blood flow. 10 deliberate slow blinks. Full eyelid closure. Meibomian gland compression. Tear film refresh. The blink rate that dropped from 15 to 20 per minute to 4 to 6 during screen focus is manually compensated. The lipid layer, the outermost layer of the tear film that prevents evaporation, is restored by the Meibomian gland expression each complete blink produces. 90 seconds total. Posture, eyes, blinks. Every 30 to 45 minutes across the desk hours. The interventions are brief because the mechanisms they address accumulate slowly. 30 minutes of sitting does not produce permanent change. 30 minutes of sitting followed by 90 seconds of correction resets the accumulation. The damage is from uninterrupted sitting, not from sitting itself. Mid-morning, around 10. This is when the cortisol awakening response is fully resolved and the body enters its sustained daytime metabolic state. For anyone practicing time-restricted eating, 10 in the morning is when the first meal produces the most favorable insulin response after the early cortisol peak is cleared. Eating during the cortisol peak amplifies the insulin response beyond what the meal alone would produce. The cortisol-insulin interaction means that very early breakfast consumed during the cortisol surge may produce a larger glucose spike than the same meal consumed an hour later when cortisol has declined. The 7 o'clock timing works if cortisol peaks early and resolves by 7. The 10 o'clock timing works if the cortisol peak extends later, particularly relevant for the evening shifted chronotype. A glass of water at 10, the second of the day. It maintains the plasma dilution the morning glass initiated and replaces the fluid the kidneys have been processing since the cortisol-driven morning diuresis began. The mid-morning hydration is not about thirst. It is about maintaining the viscosity reduction the first glass achieved across the hours when cardiac risk remains elevated. 12:30, walk after eating. Because the capillary recruitment mechanism has a specific metabolic application when the timing aligns with the post-meal glucose peak. Glucose peaks in the blood 30 to 60 minutes after a meal. Walking during this window activates GLUT4 transporters in the leg muscles, glucose channels that migrate to the muscle cell surface, and pull glucose from the blood without requiring insulin. 10 minutes at a moderate pace is sufficient. The glucose that would have remained elevated for 90 minutes, producing the post-meal drowsiness, the afternoon fog, the energy crash, is cleared into muscle cells that are burning it for locomotion. Walking treats the glucose problem with glucose disposal rather than masking the drowsiness with caffeine. The molecule that is producing the sleepiness is cleared by the muscle contraction rather than hidden by a stimulant. The caffeine half-life is 5 to 6 hours. Coffee at 1 in the afternoon is still producing diuretic and stimulant effects at 7 when the body should be transitioning towards sleep. The post-lunch walk replaces the afternoon coffee for anyone who understands what the drowsiness actually is. 1:30, the nap window. Because adenosine has been building since 6 in the morning, and the circadian system provides a natural dip that every culture on Earth has recognized. Adenosine, the molecule that accumulates during wakefulness and produces sleep pressure, has been building for 7.5 hours. The post-lunch circadian trough produces a natural dip in alertness that aligns with the adenosine load. A 20-minute nap before 2 in the afternoon clears accumulated adenosine from the synaptic cleft without entering slow-wave sleep. Confining the nap to stage 1 and stage 2 non-REM, which is sufficient for adenosine clearance and memory consolidation, avoids the grogginess a longer nap produces. The 2 o'clock cutoff matters. Napping after 2 clears enough adenosine to reduce sleep pressure at bedtime, pushing sleep onset later, and compressing the total sleep duration that overnight recovery requires. The nap is a tool with a time window. Inside the window, it enhances the day. Outside it, it degrades the night. The morning was about initiation, setting the clocks, opening the vessels, fueling the machinery. The afternoon shifts to protection, clearing the glucose the meal produced, preserving the sleep the evening needs, processing the fluid gravity deposited. 3 Zhao to 5 Xiao. The exercise window. If the day includes deliberate exercise, resistance training, a longer walk, cycling, swimming, this is when the body is engineered to perform it. Core body temperature peaks between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. Muscle contractile force is highest. Identical muscles produce measurably more force at 4 in the afternoon than at 8 in the morning. Joint flexibility peaks because synovial fluid viscosity is at its daily minimum after a full day of movement. Reaction time is fastest. Pain tolerance is highest. The same intensity of exercise feels less effortful in the afternoon than in the morning because the pain processing threshold shifts with the circadian temperature curve. Injury risk is lowest during this window because the combination of warm muscles, flexible joints, peak neuromuscular coordination, and maximum core temperature produces the most resilient musculoskeletal system the body achieves in any 24-hour period. Morning exercise is not harmful. The morning walk is low intensity and captures the circadian, synovial, and vascular benefits that justify its early timing. but high-intensity or resistance exercise, where injury risk and performance both matter, aligns with the afternoon temperature peak. The worst exercise window is the one that does not happen. 4 Salvios, the hydration shift, because every milliliter consumed after this hour is on a collision course with the 2 in the morning bladder. Fluid pooled in the legs all day redistributes centrally after lying down and fills the bladder in the early hours of the night. Fluid consumed after 4 adds to that volume. Front-loading 70% of the day's intake before this hour means the kidneys handle the bulk while you are awake and the bathroom is accessible. The shift is not to 0. Thirst after 4 should be addressed with small sips. Dehydration thickens the blood. But the large volumes, the glass with dinner, the tea on the couch, should be consumed earlier. The overnight kidneys receive a minimal workload. The bladder enters the night near empty. 6 Salvios in the evening. Dinner, because the liver has a clock and the clock is about to switch programs. The liver's metabolic program shifts after dark from glycogen storage to glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis. Hepatic lipogenesis, the conversion of excess carbohydrate to fat, accelerates in the evening hours. The carbohydrate load consumed at 7 in the morning is stored as glycogen. The identical load consumed at 9 in the evening is converted to triglycerides. Dinner timing before 7, ideally 3 hours before bed, allows the digestive process to complete before the body transitions to its overnight fasting program. Hidden evening salt, cheese, cured meats, condiments, bread produces a delayed renal excretion that peaks at 2 to 3 in the morning. The sodium activates overnight water retention, followed by a renal dump that fills the bladder hours after falling asleep. Evening. Sugar produces an insulin spike followed by a rebound drop that triggers additional renal fluid excretion on the same overnight timeline. Alcohol suppresses vasopressin. The kidneys lose the hormonal brake that should be concentrating urine during sleep, and the bladder fills from 2 directions simultaneously. The dinner is not just about what you eat. It is about when you eat it, and what is hidden inside it that the kidneys will process at 2 in the morning. 8 Graus. Screen light and the melatonin window. The suprachiasmatic nucleus that morning sunlight synchronized at 6:15 is now preparing the opposite signal. Melatonin release from the pineal gland begins approximately 2 hours before natural sleep onset. Melatonin does not produce sleep. It signals to every system in the body that sleep is approaching, initiating the cascade of core temperature reduction, metabolic program switching, and immune system activation that sleep requires. The melanopsin receptors that morning sunlight activated respond to blue wavelength light from screens with sufficient intensity to suppress melatonin release. The pineal gland's melatonin signal, which should begin 2 hours before sleep onset, is delayed. 2 hours of evening screen exposure can shift melatonin onset by 60 to 90 minutes, compressing the sleep window. Blue light blocking glasses with amber lenses filter the suppressive wavelengths. Night mode on devices reduces blue emission, but typically not enough. The most effective intervention is reducing screen use in the final 90 minutes before bed. A physical book under warm light. Conversation, the bedtime sequence described below. Bedroom temperature affects sleep architecture through the core temperature mechanism the body uses to initiate and maintain sleep. Core body temperature must drop by approximately 1 degree Celsius for sleep onset to occur. The hypothalamus triggers peripheral vasodilation, particularly in the hands and feet, to radiate heat from the core to the skin surface and into the environment. A bedroom that is too warm impedes this heat dissipation. The core temperature cannot drop sufficiently, and sleep onset is delayed. A bedroom between 16 and 19 degrees Celsius provides the thermal gradient the body needs to shed the heat that sleep initiation requires. Feet play a specific role. Warm feet in a cool room accelerate sleep onset because dilated blood vessels in the feet radiate heat efficiently, helping the core temperature drop. Socks in bed accelerate the core temperature drop the hypothalamus requires. Cool air on the skin, warm feet inside the covers, and the core temperature falls through the gradient the hypothalamus requires. 9 Narasts. Legs up the wall. Because the fluid that has been pooling in your legs all day is about to fill your bladder if you do not process it now. 20 minutes with the legs elevated above heart level. The gravitational fluid drains centrally. You urinate before bed, processing the leg fluid while awake. The volume that would have woken you at 2 is already gone. Compression stockings during the day prevent the pooling. Less pooling means less nocturnal bladder filling, fewer awakenings. Combining daily walking, compression stockings, and evening leg elevation addresses the mechanism at 3 points in the chain. The legs up period is also the evening stretching window, and the timing is deliberate. Fascia is most compliant in the evening after a full day of body temperature warming and movement-driven hydration. Stretching that produces the most lasting range of motion change is performed when the tissue is warmest and most hydrated. Now, in the evening, not in the morning when the tissue is coolest and the fluid has been gelling overnight. 90 seconds of sustained holds on the 3 or 4 tightest areas. Hip flexors shortened from the day sitting, hamstrings compressed from the desk chair, thoracic spine rounded from screen posture, capturing both fascial remodeling and gravitational fluid processing in a single 20-minute window. Floor sitting during the evening, replacing the sofa with the floor for 30 to 60 minutes while reading or watching television, provides continuous low-level mobility demand that the sofa eliminates. Getting down to the floor and up from the floor loads the hip joints through their deep flexion range, recruits the quadriceps through a movement pattern that mirrors the sit-to-stand transfer determining functional independence after 70, and maintains the ankle dorsiflexion range that elevated seating progressively eliminates. The discomfort is the stimulus. The body shifts position every few minutes because no floor position is sustainable for long, and each shift is a microloading event the joints need and the sofa denies. Cold water on the feet. 30 seconds in a basin or under the tap before the bedtime sequence. Cold triggers rapid vasoconstriction. The baroreceptors register the peripheral resistance change and trigger a parasympathetic shift. The reactive vasodilation after the cold produces a warming flush that persists for 15 to 30 minutes. The parasympathetic shift primes the autonomic nervous system for what follows. 9:30, the bedtime sequence. 3 actions, 30 seconds each. Floss. The interproximal biofilm that accumulated over 24 hours is disrupted before it matures to the pathogenic state that compromises the gingival epithelial barrier. The bacteria entering the bloodstream through inflamed gum tissue during 8 hours of sleep, seeding arterial plaques, and reaching distant organs is prevented by 2 minutes of mechanical biofilm disruption. Gargle. 30 seconds of sustained pharyngeal muscle contraction against the fluid load. The pharyngeal branch of the vagus activates parasympathetic shift through a pathway distinct from humming, cold water, or breathing techniques. The pharyngeal constrictors, the muscles holding the airway open during sleep, receive their daily isometric training stimulus. Hum for 60 seconds. 1. Sustained note. The sinuses resonate. Sinus nitric oxide production increases 15-fold as the acoustic vibration pumps nitric oxide-rich air through the ostia into the nasal airway. The vagus nerve, millimeters from the vibrating vocal cords, receives direct mechanical stimulation. The exhale-to-inhale ratio locks at 3:1 or 4:1 without counting. The vocal cords enforce it. The autonomic system shifts parasympathetically through dual vagal input, mechanical and respiratory, running simultaneously. The body enters the state it needs for sleep onset without trying to relax. The physics produces the relaxation. If the legs buzz or crawl, squeeze both hands around each calf for 30 seconds. The mechanoreceptive fibers from deep pressure close the spinal gate in the dorsal horn, blocking the signal that dropping dopamine can no longer suppress. The reactive vasodilation after release produces a 5 to 15-minute window of quiet legs. That window is the sleep onset window. Sleep position. Left side. The esophageal gastric junction sits above the gastric pool on the left side. Gravity keeps acid in the stomach, rather than allowing it to cross the lower esophageal sphincter. The inferior vena cava runs to the right of the spine. Left side sleeping avoids compressing it, maintaining optimal venous return. Nasal breathing during sleep, mouth closed, air entering and exiting through the nose exclusively. The nasal airway filters, warms, and humidifies the incoming air. The nasal mucosa produces nitric oxide that the humming at bedtime amplified. The residual nitric oxide in the nasal passages continues providing mild bronchodilation and pulmonary vasodilation through the first hours of sleep. Mouth breathing bypasses the nasal filtration, dries the pharyngeal mucosa, drops the jaw and tongue backward, and narrows the pharyngeal space that the gargling just trained the muscles to hold open. Mouth tape, a strip of surgical tape holding the lips closed, maintains the nasal breathing pattern for people whose mouths fall open after sleep onset. The day closes not with an alarm, but with a sequence that each prior decision built, one piece at a time. The water that diluted the clotting risk, the walk that opened the vessels, the light that set the clocks, the protein that fed the muscles, the breaks that reset what sitting accumulated, the glucose disposal that the post-meal walk provided, the nap that cleared the adenosine without stealing from the night, the hydration shift that protected the overnight bladder, the dinner time to the liver's program, the leg elevation that processed the fluid before the kidneys had to, and the bedtime sequence that sealed the oral barrier, trained the airway, activated the vagus, and positioned the body for the sleep the entire day was building toward. Feynman said the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Most people have been fooling themselves about their mornings, their afternoons, and their nights for decades, optimizing for comfort and convenience while the body ran its program in the background, working around every decision that was made at the wrong hour. Not one intervention in this sequence is timed by preference. Everyone is timed by the physics of the body at that hour. The glass of water at 6 is not a habit. It is a dilution of blood that peaks in thrombogenicity at the hour the cardiac risk window opens. The sunlight at 6:15 is the synchronization signal that every peripheral clock requires. The walk after lunch is glucose interception through a pathway the pancreas cannot access alone. The legs up the wall at 9 is not relaxation. It is gravitational reversal of the fluid that would otherwise fill the bladder at 2 in the morning. None of the interventions are new. Everyone has been explained, demonstrated, and understood in isolation. But the hour each one belongs to, the specific moment the body requires it, had never been assembled into a single sequence. Until now. This is the schedule your body has been running without anyone writing it down, the tapestry Feynman described, every small piece revealing the organization of the whole. Your body already knows the sequence. It has been waiting for you to learn it.